All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is game week. It is finally here. Week one is right around the corner, something that we have all been building towards and waiting for quite some time now. It has been a highly talked about offseason for the Tennessee Volunteers. We have been breaking it down throughout the spring, throughout the summer, but now it is finally the fall. And I gotta say, it's feeling like the fall out there too. Now, I'm not one to believe that this is going to stay exactly over the next couple of weeks. I'm not naive enough to believe that we're not going to have another hot spell, but I don't know about you guys. When I walked outside the last couple days, it was feeling nice and brisk outside. Feels like football is around the corner. My name is Rick Butler. Joined with me as always, that is Ryan Schumpert, and that is Ryan Sylvia. It's a Wednesday morning here in Knoxville. We are only a couple days from game day. That's only a couple days from us heading to Atlanta. Schumpert, how you feeling today?
I'm doing well. Glad to be back on here. Yeah, it doesn't really matter for us because we'd be inside, even if the game was in Knoxville. But with how nice weather it is this week, it's almost a shame that they're playing the game inside. It seems like it's gonna at least continue to Saturday. So excited to get going, and yeah, it's been a nice, not that we necessarily needed an extra boost or an extra shot of juice with football back this week, but certainly the cooler weather has been just that.
Right. Sylvia, what's going on with you? How are things?
I'm doing good. I've had this conversation with my girlfriend about the weather where I can't get out of the headspace where I'm like, this is nice, but man, 2 weeks it's going to trick us. And she's like, we
Yeah.
just need to enjoy it while we have it,
Yeah,
and be happy with what it is. And so I'm trying to mentally be like, okay, let's enjoy
but
this
that's
because it is definitely a trick. We're getting tricked right now.
Yeah, but see, I don't think it's even a trick. It's August. I don't think who out here is like, oh, we've turned the corner. It's fall. Everybody knows that this is just
I've
a cool stretch.
I've heard
Yeah.
people want to
No.
believe, they want something to believe in. And I
Hmm.
think they want this to become fall. I mean, there's a lot of people talking about, oh, it is officially tailgating weather and it's this and it's that. And I think deep down they probably know. I think you're right about that. But some people want something to believe in, man. And this weather it's that for them.
I just don't want to get got. I don't want to get tricked. I don't want to, put the shorts away and then have to bring them out like a
Yeah.
week later. But I do need to turn this page where I'm like, we can just enjoy this week while we have it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. I'm just enjoying it. I know
Yeah.
it's gonna be hot again, but it's August. Like of course it's gonna be hot again.
Yeah.
Week 0 presented a little football last weekend. We got to watch the game together, at least Kansas State versus Iowa State. And then I know you guys watched a little bit more football into the evening. That was a nice little appetizer, but boy, is there a good slate of games on this weekend. I know we're going to be doing a little bit of traveling for it, so I imagine we'll have some iPad games on. We'll have some radio games on in the car. I think we'll make it home for the late night former Pac-12 action, but just the late night college football action. That should be a good time all around. Is there any, just real quick before we kind of get into our Syracuse preview here, is there any particular game that is on y'all's mind? I think for me, it's going to be that iPad game right at the start of Tennessee Syracuse. It's going to be Texas Ohio State. I'm sure that's the easiest answer to get to. But is there anything that else? Is there anything else that's on y'all's radar heading into the first week of the college football season here?
Yeah, I mean it's just an awesome slate in general. I'd say we'll probably be driving back or still working, but LSU Clemson on Saturday night is a game that I'm really intrigued by. I think maybe even more intrigued than Texas Ohio State. I think Texas Ohio State is where not good shouldn't get into too much of a ramble about this. This is where the expanded playoff. This game doesn't mean nearly as much. Like, yeah,
Sure.
it'll be cool to see. Both these teams are going to be in the playoff when the season ends, and probably have a good chance to play again. So it doesn't mean as much. Whereas Clemson, it certainly wouldn't kill them to lose this game. LSU, it makes the room for error a lot smaller if they're going to make the playoff in a big year for Brian Kelly. So, and I'm just, Clemson's gotten so much national championship buzz, and I'd say I'm less convinced of that than I would be Texas Ohio State. So that one, I'm always biased towards games that we're going to get to watch a little bit more of. I think the Friday night
Mhm.
games are awesome. I'm super excited for Auburn, Baylor, Georgia Tech, Colorado should be good too, and then, yeah, I mean, you teased it, Rick, but late night, I don't know how much I'll be up fighting to watch it once we get back. But 11 p.m. kick out in Southern California for UCLA Utah will be interesting to watch Nico and see if the Kyle Whittingham and the Utes can have get a nice start to what they hope is a bounce back season after a really disappointing 2024.
Yeah, they're taking on the master of the deep ball over there. Not my words. Not my words. Don't get at me for it, but some people are saying.
Yeah, it is just criminal for Tennessee fans and for us that easily one of the best games of the year is just going to be at the same exact time as the Tennessee game. And,
Yeah.
Maybe for some Tennessee fans, it'll be lopsided enough that they can, flip over to Texas, Ohio State at times. But I don't. We'll see how that unfolds. And also, I'm the type of guy too. You're not going to miss a snap of your favorite team's game, right? So it does suck that that's at the same time. I'm also excited for Baylor Auburn for really no reason besides I think it'll be a really good game. And the one that I think people are still sleeping on a little bit, and there's a lot of Vols involved in this one, two former Vols, Alabama, Florida State. See some Squirrel White, some Elijah Herring, some Jason Jenkins and company get going down there. I think that one could get maybe a little more spicy than you'd expect, especially because it is played in Tallahassee. So that's another one. I think that's a 3:30 kick. I think it's the one right after Tennessee and ABC too. So that should be a fun one to, if you're watching the game on TV, you maybe don't have to change the channel, just lead right into it.
Yeah, Squirrel White's he's going to be one that's just going to be weird to see in another uniform.
Yes.
That one is going to be very strange. And real quick, Sunday has two great games as well. Virginia Tech, South Carolina, second game in Atlanta that weekend. That'll be Beamer Bowl and all that. But also Notre Dame, Miami on ABC. That'll be a fun one as well. I think a top 10 matchup.
Carson Beck, that's another one. I don't know if it's necessarily going to look weird, but that's just, I feel like, going to be one that you flip on and like, oh, yeah, that's right. Carson Beck's in Miami. That's strange.
Yeah.
That feels weird.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that is going to be the week one slate, but of course we are focused on week one for the Tennessee Volunteers as they head to Atlanta for the Aflac kickoff game against Syracuse. Real quick before we get into our preview, just wanted to let everybody know that, hey, our normal game day post-game routine is going to be back in action for this year. And obviously with adding Ryan Sylvia over the offseason, that's only going to be expanded out more and more. So make sure you are checking out RockyTopInsider.com and, of course, Rocky Top Insider on YouTube for all of the Tennessee post-game videos, the press conference videos, all of our post-game work. We will have it on there. We'll have stand-up videos from the field. We will have more reactionary press pass podcasts right after the game from Neyland Stadium or wherever the opposing venue is. We will have you covered on that. And then we also want to encourage you to check out WATE, our good friends over at Channel 6. Ryan Sylvia and I will be part of the pregame show. I believe that's going to be right before the 11 o'clock hour, but we'll let you know over on RockyTopInsider.com. Again, with our good friends Sam Rothman and KCK, breaking down everything over there for WATE. So certainly a lot of great stuff going on for us and a lot of ways for us to get you the content of game day that you are looking for, whether that's before the game or after the game. Again, just make sure to stay tuned to RockyTopInsider.com throughout the week as we continue to bring you things like storylines and odds and predictions and all that kind of jazz as we get into game day. Normal routine, back in action, only expanded with the addition of our good friend Ryan Sylvia, who's been a phenomenal addition to the podcast here. By the way, speaking of the podcast, we love seeing some great numbers out of our audience here throughout the fall so far. We encourage you to keep listening. We love seeing that. We love hearing the feedback. And obviously, we are going to do our best to bring you the best Tennessee coverage that we can for this upcoming season, which should be a fun one, a wild one, but we'll see how things shake out. Guys, we've talked a lot about Tennessee, obviously, throughout the last month, throughout the offseason, things of that nature. Let's kind of start with the Syracuse side of things. Again, we'll get into the Tennessee side of things, and we'll get into this actual game preview itself. But let's talk about the Orange a little bit. Had a monster breakout season last year under Fran Brown for the first year of his head coaching tenure there. I believe a 10-3 record. They had Kyle McCord, who was a dynamic quarterback for them. There was a lot of things to like about the Orange, but there's also been a lot of turnover through that. Sylvie, you've talked to a Syracuse sideline reporter at some point this week. You put out that article over on RockyTopInsider.com. Tell us a little bit about just kind of your first takeaways from that conversation and maybe some of the important things that people will need to know just to kind of start us off in this conversation before the game here coming up on Saturday.
Well, you hit on it a little bit there about the turnover that they felt like. They were a really good team last year. And I think we all knew that there was a lot of missing pieces. Kyle McCord, namely, was the number one guy that, obviously the quarterback who was so productive. That makes it a little difficult to just turn the page and be good the next year when you do lose that guy. Tennessee knows about that. right now as well. But just hearing what the sideline reporter had to say, it was eye opening in some ways to see like the exact numbers. He said Syracuse brings back just 37% of its production, which is kind of insane, and that is the fewest in the ACC. They had 4 draft picks, a 1,000-yard rusher who's gone, star tight end, the quarterback, leading pass rusher. All those guys are gone. They had 12 all ACC selections last year on the 10-win team, and only one of them returns for this year, and it's their punter in Jack Stonehouse, Stonehouse punter. It is the cousin of Ryan
Okay.
Stonehouse,
I was going to ask that because I read this when I read the story.
So yes, there is some relation there, and they did some things in the portal. Obviously, Steve Angeli, Notre Dame transfer at quarterback, in a couple different pieces. But that was the number one thing I think that really stood out to me was, man, that it's not no exaggeration, I guess, about the turnover that they're having to deal with, and that's why you look at the Vegas lines for their season win total, and they're just trying to make a bowl game and things like that. It does make a lot of sense. But one position, namely that he mentioned, said they were unproven at cornerback, which I think could get interesting for a Tennessee team that is unproven at wide receiver. Maybe that's a good first step that group could take in trying to get on the right footing as the season gets.
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, I want to say he mentioned that it looks like a true freshman is going to start at one of the cornerback spots. So that's obviously one I think you circle if you're Tennessee. And, he talked about some of the inexperience at the defensive line, at linebacker. So, and, since it sounded like safety was the one spot on the defense Syracuse feels, at least they're proven about, maybe not just feels good about. So if Tennessee can run the ball well in this game and draw some of draw safety into the box, it seems like they should have some opportunities to make some plays down the field. I think one thing, and the 24/7 sports guy was on with Bob and Sam yesterday on Fox Sports Knoxville and just catching a little bit of that. I think one thing that both Leonard and the guy said from 24/7, despite all the turnover receivers that both those people seemed optimistic about what Syracuse has at receiver. Like they feel like there are good pieces there. I think Jonte Cook is one that a lot of fans will know just because he's a former 5-star recruit, big name at Texas. Not that he played a ton, but a big name. So, I think that's interesting. I think that's intriguing, especially when you're talking about an offense that was really good last year. And I think you naturally have an element of kind of what Tennessee had with after having so much success in 21 and 22 with a new coach and players that they mostly inherited. Obviously, both went out and got a quarterback in the portal. How much of it is a system, how much of it is good coaching, how much of it is the players themselves. So I think that one is, maybe just from hearing both those things, while there's so much production lost in Syracuse's passing game that was really good a year ago, at least from the Syracuse side of it, there's some optimism that maybe the step back won't be as big as some people think.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think that's all why I find this game so interesting, whether you're watching from a Tennessee or a Syracuse perspective, or whether you're just a college football fan who's turning this game on ABC to kind of start out the day in the noon window. There is a lot of turnover for both teams. We've talked about some of the turnover for Tennessee throughout the offseason, and you guys have been mentioning just there, Syracuse has had some big losses, whether it's Kyle McCord, whether it's LaQuint Allen, the leading rusher, Trevor Pena, the leading pass catcher, their leading tight end is gone. Jackson Meeks, a star wide receiver for them last year as well, who, by the way, it's something just kind of coincidental and notable when you go back to their team last year is that their leading rusher, LaQuint Allen, and their leading wide receiver in terms of yards both had exactly 1,021 yards.
Yeah,
That is,
I did notice
that's just pretty wild. Who Jackson
also,
Meeks, go ahead.
I was also going to say just that LaQuint Allen, their leading rusher, also had 521 receiving yards too.
Yes.
So he had over 1,500 all-purpose yards.
Yes, he was a monster for them. Which, going back to Jackson Meeks a second ago, maybe that's something that Tennessee fans and Syracuse fans can kind of unite on, is I believe he got cut from the Detroit Lions. I guess it was yesterday. So there you go, both Tennessee and Syracuse fans dealing with a cut from the Detroit Lions for one of their former previous favorite players. And again, you can kind of go down the offense. Who's going to step up for them? I think you're right. Cook is certainly a big name to watch. And we're going to get into plenty about Steve Angeli, their new transfer quarterback. But it's going to be a battle of transfer quarterbacks. And I think that certainly is one of the interesting lines. We've mentioned the offensive turnover, but again, like every team, you're going to have some on both sides of the ball. Linebacker Justin Barron, who was their leading tackler last year with 88 tackles, he's gone. And then their leading edge rusher, I believe it's Fadil Diggs. He had 7.5 total sacks last year. He is gone as well, too. And so you look at some similarities about who both teams have lost: their quarterback, their running back, big name wide receivers, a big time edge rusher. Who's going to step up for these teams? Are we going to hear of some new household names? I think that's certainly one of the intriguing things going into this game.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, look, that's an advantage for Tennessee. You would have pointed to that as something you'd be worried about Tennessee in the opener, just playing a power forward team that's not as good as them. That you're like, all right, well, Tennessee's got a lot of new. They have a quarterback that wasn't on the team until after the spring portal window, but Syracuse is in the same boat. And, I think that's the thing I'd come back to with some of this optimism from Syracuse people about the receiving core is it's kind of hard to feel like they're going to hit the ground running, just because that's hard to do. And Tennessee is probably going to be one of the better defenses they face all season. So when that's the case, I think you would expect some sloppy play probably from both sides. And I think you just typically conventional wisdom says you lean in favor of a team that should be better in the trenches. And certainly that should be Tennessee in this game.
Yeah.
Well, that is part of the interesting discussion that I had with their sideline reporter, Tim Leonard. Is he talked about what would be the ideal way that this game goes for Syracuse. And he said it would be one that's kind of gets a little defensive, because I think his concern right now is, would Tennessee be able to, or would Syracuse be able to hang with Tennessee if Tennessee is able to start, getting that offense rolling? And that's not something we've necessarily seen. I guess in the NC State game last year, if it gets like that, where Tennessee's offense does start to click in some ways, and that needed a little bit of a burst last year, but if it is able to start the clip, if it is able to start to click, then maybe that is something that Syracuse isn't able to. I'm sorry. Let me start
That was a fun video moment.
Yeah. Let me just start that entire talking point over, if that's okay.
Yeah. Rewind 2 minutes.
It's all right. Okay. Anyways, that is something that I thought was interesting that Tim Leonard, their sideline reporter, was talking about was, what is the ideal situation for Syracuse in this game? And it's probably one where it is a little bit more defensive, because it seemed like his concern was maybe that Syracuse wouldn't be able to, hang with the Tennessee offense if it is able to start to click, like in that NC State game a year ago, which you got some help there from the defense and things like that. But once things started to snowball, NC State had no answer for Tennessee's defense, and that's how you got the result that it ended up being. It doesn't feel like he's confident that Steve Angeli, with the first game and limited time and the pieces that they lost around him, would be able to hang. So at the same time, though, I think you have to like Tennessee's defense not give up much more than like 10 or 14 points, if even that. So we'll get into the finer details of it, but that does, raise some questions, I guess, about it. If Tennessee's offense is able to get going a little bit, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of confidence that Syracuse's offense would have the response given all the turnover.
Yeah, I think that's just to kind of lead into what would have to happen for Tennessee to lose situation. How does Tennessee blow out? Like, I guess I see the logic there, but I'm just not sure I overall agree with it from a standpoint of like Tennessee won a lot of low scoring games last year. The last 2 years, Tennessee's played a lot of games that they've won low scoring. Syracuse last year won one game where they didn't score more than 30 points, and they had 3 games all season that they didn't score 30 points, period, and they were 1-2 in those games. One of them being a close game to Stanford that they lost 26-24. They got blown out at Pitt, and then they did lose a high scoring game at Boston College, 37-31. So I think both teams would probably say just naturally that they don't feel great winning a shootout because they don't feel great about their offense, period. But I just look at the recent history and think more that Tennessee would be more equipped to win a low scoring game leaning on their defense.
Yeah, and even jumping along to that side right now, like I do think that one of the things about what both teams are thinking about here is how can we create some intercept, or how can we create some turnovers, right? How can we create some havoc? And I think if you are turning the ball, or if you are getting turnovers, excuse me, you're forcing them, that's potentially leading to points. And I think it is one of those games where if you can kind of find points and if you can kind of run up the scoreboard in different kind of ways, maybe that's giving you an advantage in the game. So, but that's also, again, just kind of what makes this game intriguing is it's two teams where there are question marks places, and you don't know exactly what the identity of these two teams are going to be, or how they're going to how are they going to react to certain types of pressure throughout the game. It's just obviously going to be a contest where Tennessee's got to stay on their toes. But if it is a defensive battle, I like what Tennessee's going to be able to do there, because Ryan, to your point a minute ago, when it comes down to the trenches, I think that Tennessee's got the advantage there, and that's a big thing to say. Whether it's kind of cutting off Syracuse's run game, or getting after the quarterback, or just being able to run the ball themselves with the trio of running backs that they have, I think that plays into Tennessee's favor. So that's one of the intriguing things about this game early on, with so much turnover from both sides, is what is the identity of these teams going to be? I think we're going to find out fairly quickly at some point on Saturday.
For
Yeah.
sure. Sylvia, I don't know about you. I'd say from the how does Tennessee lose this game scenario. And look, we've talked about this over the offseason. I think it's got to be turnovers, especially early in the game. I think falling behind early in the game would be a big path to Tennessee losing. When Tennessee goes off to a hot start, it's hard to imagine seeing them losing this game just because of their ability to run the football and play good defense. And even with some injuries in the secondary, have a good secondary. I think you feel good about them playing from ahead. So, I think it's that. And then you'd say the two ways how you're going to fall behind early. I think it's turnovers. That's the thing you worry about for this game for Tennessee. And two, do they give up a big play? I know that's something that the Syracuse sideline reporter talked about in y'all's conversation of, can Syracuse hit some big plays in this game, because it's going to be a challenge for them to sustain drives against Tennessee's defense. And then last thing I would just throw in there as, to me, the X factor. I mean, it's the special teams. Like, that's, I think there's always an unknown, a little bit of an unknown about that, maybe more so for Tennessee right now, just because of the Boo Carter situation. Is he going to be returning punts? And who would it be if not? Because Jermon McCoy's out, Squirrel White's gone. Those were the guys that returned it last year. And then, as you noted, an all ACC punter in Stonehouse. So that's just kind of an X factor of Tennessee's the better team here. What's a way that something could kind of get quirky and Tennessee lose? I think you would point to special teams maybe being something that things could get odd.
I think that's fair. I think those are the two big things. To me, the only way Tennessee loses this game is if they turn the ball over, or like you said, the field flips and special teams with the return or fumble or something like that. Because I just have so much faith in Tennessee's defense right now to not let Syracuse score like really more than 2 touchdowns. And if they give up more than 14 points in this game, I would be decently surprised. And so if that's the case, then one of the only ways you're going to lose this is if Joey Aguilar's throwing interceptions and setting up the Syracuse offense down the field, or that one of those special teams miscues happen. So I would completely agree. I think that's really one of the only paths to Tennessee losing this game, is they get in their own way. Like, they beat themselves, because it just does feel like pretty top to bottom right now. Tennessee is a much better roster than Syracuse. And I think that'll probably be a big difference in what we see on Saturday.
Yeah. And the only thing that I would add on to that is, I know it's cliche. I have to go with the cliche point because you guys hit the good points already. But Fran Brown is a coach that I personally admire, especially watching his press conference there on Monday. I think he's a gritty coach, and what he could do. Don't give a team like that hope. It's cliche. Mm-hmm. People say it everywhere, but don't let kind of, some momentum plays build up if you're Tennessee against your favor. Not that I think that's, an end of the world type of scenario. I think that Tennessee is talented enough to stop a brief slide if it does happen at some point in the game. But, again, if you're not, Syracuse not expected to win this game, in my opinion, at least, not playing with a ton of pressure, right? Don't give them a chance to kind of push all their chips into the table and run with something. But that being said, again, I think that Tennessee is the more talented team here. And if there is a brief slide at some point in the middle of the game, I think that Tennessee does have the ability to come back from it, especially with that defense. But again, we'll see how things go on Saturday.
Yeah, I would say into the reverse of it, if Tennessee wins this game big, I think real blowout style. I mean, obviously they're 14-point favorites, so they could win this game big and
Like
it'd
NC
be
State style.
yeah, yes, NC State style. Could maybe be even a little bit more than that because it's not like Tennessee's offense was great in that game. So I would go two ways. One is complete NC State style of this Syracuse can't block Tennessee up front. NC State couldn't block Tennessee at all. They couldn't do anything on offense because they were just completely overwhelmed by Tennessee's defensive line. I think I would point to that same thing. The skill position guys for Syracuse can be better than the outside thinks, but Tennessee's corners aren't bad either. Tennessee's corners are good. So I have a real hard time thinking Tennessee's going to get dominated outside in this game. So if Tennessee can dominate up front the way they did last year against NC State, I have a hard time thinking they won't win this game handedly. And then I think in the way to probably be more exciting for Tennessee fans is just if they hit some chunk plays in the passing game. Go back to literally Sylvia's one of your first points about some of that youth and inexperience at corner. Can Tennessee find a way to hit chunk plays offensively, and kind of like we were saying about with Syracuse, not have to sustain drives? I think it'd be really tough or maybe not even tough for Syracuse to stay in the game if that's the case.
Yeah, and I think it's I don't think it'll be full 2022 like they're just taking the top off the defense every single play type of feeling, but I think it'll be better than it was last year just because as far as just the Syracuse game, just because of the competition, and I think there's going to be at least a hint of let's get back to it with Joey Aguilar. It was so frustrating, I think, for a lot of people last year. Not when it was there, they missed a lot of them, but it just wasn't there a lot too. I feel like there's going to be not like I said to the 2022 2021 level, but at least a little bit more of an attempt maybe early in this season to try to get that connection there. You have an opportunity against Syracuse, you have an opportunity against ETSU to maybe look to some of those options down the field because of inexperience and just the talent gap, particularly in that second game. I wouldn't be surprised if we did see a little bit more of that early. Now, the question is, can you do it to any degree against the Georgia in week 3 or against a lot of those SEC teams? But for the Syracuse game, I feel like there's a decent shot at least that they at least look to that particular too. If they do take a little bit of a lead, like let's say they go up 20-7 or something in the third quarter, that might be enough of a cushion too to like, all right, let's try to see what you got here because you don't have a lot of time till Georgia comes to town.
Hey, you mentioned Joey Aguilar a minute ago. We've talked a lot about Joey Aguilar throughout the preseason and certainly last week after he was named the starting quarterback of Tennessee and what that offense is going to be. I'm extremely intrigued on finding out what this Joey Aguilar offense looks like. We know that Joey Halzle said at the beginning of the preseason that the goal of the summer for the Tennessee coaching staff was to find ways to get that explosive offense back. What is that entirely going to look like? How much of that are we going to see in week 1? How much of that is going to be on the arm of Joey Aguilar? I think there's a lot of questions there. My question for you guys, and this is something that I've been thinking about kind of a little bit this week, is that I think we all feel good about what Tennessee's running game is going to be, right? The ability to run it with the trio of running backs that they have, Deshaun Bishop, Peyton Lewis, Star Thomas. We don't know what that's going to look like, but I think we all feel pretty good about Tennessee's ability to run the ball in this game. Do you think that there's a chance that Fran Brown at Syracuse comes out and they say, hey, we believe that we might be able to bait them into some turnovers? We don't know what this passing attack is going to look like. Joey Aguilar, the interception conversation has been talked about plenty over the summer. And we know that Tennessee's going to have a good run game. Do you think that there's any chance that Syracuse might try to find an advantage or at least kind of bait Tennessee a little bit more in the passing game? We've seen Josh Heupel completely embarrass people when they don't respect the passing game enough. But do you think that there's a chance that they go and really kind of put some pressure on the run game of Tennessee's offense to say, hey, look, throw it. Maybe they might be a little bit experienced around the corners, but we believe that we might be able to get some turnover there because of the inexperience of the offense as a whole, putting this whole thing together.
I don't know would be my answer to that. Maybe. I mean, I think
sure. We're not in the Syracuse room. We don't know. That's fair. That's a fair point.
The thing I would say against that is that Fran Brown comes from Georgia. He's coached twice against Tennessee at Georgia, and Georgia's been able to. But I guess the thing I would say is how much do you draw from that? Because Georgia's been able to do what best stop Tennessee and do the recipe of have lighter boxes. They'll be able to contain the run and just take away anything you want to throw deep down the field, play man-on-man coverage. I think Fran Brown was quick to say earlier this week, well, we're not Georgia. This is a different team. It's Syracuse is not built to play the same way against Tennessee's defense that Georgia has been, and Georgia was those 2 years that Fran Brown was the secondary coach there. So, that would point to the opposite. But again, I don't think they can necessarily play that way. So maybe that they do look to take some more risk and try to be a little bit aggressive. I wonder if you necessarily see that from the jump, because that feels like a risky move to potentially get blown out.
Right.
But if you fall behind a little bit early, you're struggling to stop the run. Certainly, I think you're maybe more willing to take some chances.
I would say that, yeah, it's probably more of a pivot from Syracuse is what I would expect to try to say you're not going to run the ball on us if Tennessee does get out to a nice start on the ground. I think it's more likely that you just say you're not getting a chunk play early in this game and hope that maybe they get a little frustrated. Maybe there is some attempt to at least go deep into to some degree, and it doesn't work out. And then maybe you do start to get that frustration building on the Tennessee sideline a little bit. I think that's probably a better recipe for success for Syracuse, is to go with those, big numbers with the shell of the defense and try to limit the big plays rather than, stack the box as much as you even can against Tennessee's offense with the way they line up, but at least, put more effort into stopping the run. I think that would maybe be something we see Syracuse go to later if Tennessee is able to get the run started, rather than something they would come out the gates with.
So one thing that we have talked about throughout the offseason so far is position battles. And that was something that we talked about on the press pass early into August. But Shump, I want to come to you kind of first on this, because you have been going over the offensive depth chart, which we're not going to get a depth chart until game day, it sounds like. That was a little bit of a twist on Monday. But you have been throughout fall camp really so far sort of projecting what you think that will look like. And without the oars, no rowing of the boats here today. Now that we sit about 4 days out from camp, we get to ask this question because we haven't seen the depth chart, but obviously we know that Tennessee is going to do a little bit of experimentation depending on how the game goes. Is there any specific position group that you've been looking at throughout this week, or that you'll be kind of eyeing in on Saturday, just where there's been conversation about a battle, whether that's been in the secondary or somewhere else? Is there anywhere that's going to kind of offensive line, especially as well? Is there any place in particular that's going to have your eye when everything unfolds on Saturday?
Certainly. I mean, there's a number.
Yeah, there's a couple.
And the running back rotation, I think, will be one that's really interesting. I can see that going any number of directions. I think how much does Deshaun Brame play is one that I'll be really curious. I mean, he's a guy there's been such positive buzz about in fall camp. Has he truly passed Ethan Davis as Tennessee's second tight end? And then just right with that conversation too, how much 12 personnel is Tennessee playing in this game? That's not necessarily a position battle, but that'll heavily affect the snap counts for guys like Braylon Staley and Ethan Davis, Deshaun Brame, even Miles Kitselman to an extent, because if they're going to have two tight ends on the field, Kitselman's for sure going to be one of them. So I think offensively, that's really where I would point. Defensively, I think it's at defensive tackle, the backup spot. What are those? We know who the first two guys are. Who are the next guys on the field for Tennessee? Pass rush sets. What does Tennessee's pass rush package look like? Besides, we know Josh Josephs will be at one of those edge spots. Who's at the other edge spots? Did they slide Tyree West or Dominique Bailey inside? Is it Jackson Moy, Bryson Easton stay out there? Like all that stuff, I'll be really curious to see what it looks like. Weirdly in the secondary, there's not a ton. I think just because of the injuries, outside of just what Boo Carter's role looks like, the injuries have kind of whittled down what I think that's largely going to look like. Maybe what some of that rotation is at the second safety spot, but I think more than anything, it's just going to be about a lot about snap counts. Is what I'll be curious to certainly be tracking some of during the game, just from an eye test situation, and then the next morning it'll be curious to see exactly what those snap counts come out to with the PFF grids.
Yeah, offensively, I think it'll just be fascinating to see what the first group on the field is. Like, it's obviously Joey Aguilar, and you got the two tackle positions and Miles Kitselman locked in, but really everyone else is like, all right, who is it going to be? Who's going to be the center? Is it going to be Sam Pendleton, which I think you lean to right now, or are they going to go to William Satterwhite? What are the guard spots? Wendell Moy seems like he's got one. What's the other guard spot look like? Is it going to be Jesse Perry or Shamu Marov, or what direction Do they go in there? Running back, we'll see all of them. I think you have to expect Deshaun Bishop to be the starter, quote unquote, at running back, but they'll get plenty of touches to each guy and see what they have there. And then wide receiver, maybe they come out in 12 personnel, but also while the top 3 receivers are pretty cemented, who's going to be able to play? Like we're hearing from Josh Heupel right now that, you got all 3 of them back at practice and this and that. Getting back to practice and actually playing in that opener and starting in that opener is different. So what is the availability of Chris Brazzell? What is the availability of Braylon Staley and those guys? And are they going to be able to play a lot on Saturday? I think it'll just be really interesting to see what Tennessee comes out in on offense, start that game. And you talked about defensively, but on the interior, how much of that, rabbits package they call it, are you going to see? How much is it with the defensive end sliding in or trying, maybe Jordan Ross or something like that, who's kind of got a big frame and would be able to play that hybrid defensive tackle type of role? How much are they going to go to that with the questions at defensive tackle? I think will be really interesting as well.
Yeah. And then just to kind of throw on any sort of last wrinkle there is we've talked about what happens if Tennessee we've talked about what happens if Tennessee is maybe going to lose this game. We've talked about what will happen if Tennessee is going to blow out Syracuse in this game. But if it's a tight game in the fourth quarter, just what does Tennessee see as their best, package or best identity early into the season? Ryan, to your point, is it going to that 12-man personnel if it's late in the fourth quarter and Tennessee needs to get an offensive drive? Is it, some sort of specific thing on the defense? But again, this is a big starting point for Tennessee. And it's a team who's trying to put a bunch of new places, especially in certain spots, together, and things are going to continue to grow and evolve throughout the season. But this is game 1, right? What does game 1 look like? What does the starting point look like? And if Tennessee gets into a battle, whether it be offensively or defensively at the end of the game, just sort of, I think that Tennessee's early, I think what Tennessee does situationally will tell us a bit about kind of how they feel about their team at this point in the season as things kind of get kicked off. So I think there are definitely some interesting rotations and things to look at.
Yeah, and I think past that, one thing I'll be curious, and it's a bit of a see it to believe it for me, but just how many new wrinkles or changes with Tennessee's offense do we see? I mean, we saw them working on stuff out of the pistol a little bit in camp. We saw them working on more stuff out of less wide splits in camp. It seems like they're at least tinkering with that. How much are they truly going to do that? I don't know, but I'll be curious to see. It's a little bit of see it to believe it. It's certainly amplified this week with a lot of the talk around Tennessee's offense. I think you're kind of reminded of it, but that'll be interesting because we saw in the very, very little we get to watch, we did see more of that in camp than we have seen in any past years.
And then in the same vein, what is the tempo going to look like? Because to me, it doesn't feel like there's going to be much of it at all, particularly early in the year. Maybe they can get back to it a little bit more as the season progresses, but it just feels like a season that's set up to be probably the slowest offense under Josh Heupel at Tennessee yet. But how much do they want to try to force it in? How much do they want to, how comfortable are they to do it? I guess like similar to your questions on offense, I think that's kind of in the mix as well, is how much tempo do they go to and how often do they do it?
Yeah, and I think one last thing on a personnel note, I mean, we hit on some of it, but just Travis Smith, I'll be curious to see how many snaps he gets, how quickly they go to him, opportunities, stuff like that. I mean, it ties into what you're talking about, but he's one guy very specifically that I'll be curious to see.
Speaking of reminders, because somebody said something about a reminder earlier, the conversation about the offensive line, for whatever reason, sparked me to remember to bring my binoculars. So thank you for that. I might have forgotten them. I don't know what the line of sight is going to look like from the Benz, from Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I need to bring my binoculars. They're not great binoculars or anything, but binoculars are helpful at this time of the season when you're trying to, especially if you're like me, you got bad eyesight, trying to figure out who is out there on the field. So thank you for that reminder. All right. We've talked about this game sideways from the Tennessee perspective, from the Syracuse side of things. Let's kind of get into the end. By the way, we won't be doing picks. That'll be coming out on Friday on RockyTopInsider.com. But I'll ask you both, and then I'll answer myself. Where are you feeling about 4 days out from this game? Sort of tease what your pick might be, but ultimately just sort of where are you feeling about this game? I think that from looking at the majority of the media so far, and again, we're only recording on Wednesday mornings, so there's a lot more time for people to get their picks out and get their predictions out. It seems like most people are going with Tennessee. It seems like people have kind of some respect for what
Not just
Syracuse can
most
go in the game.
people,
Oh,
not just most beings. The dolphin likes to vol us at the Georgia Aquarium, so
All
most mammals. Yeah. We'll see
I
if
had
there's
no
some.
idea where you were going with that. That was so
We'll see if
good.
there's some like dog picks later in the week.
Mammals. That is funny. Yeah, the dolphin from the Georgia Aquarium. It picked Tennessee. That's a big one. Yeah, there is a dog that normally, throws the, that hits
The
the ball
basketballs,
into
yeah,
one of the baskets. Yeah.
yeah.
Speaking of basketball, in like a couple months, we're going to be right back here doing the same thing. We're going to be previewing Tennessee versus Syracuse. Is that not right? But next time
I
on the
doubt
Hard
it'll
Rock,
really be a Syracuse
yeah,
preview podcast,
it
but
won't be a
Tennessee does play
45-minute
Syracuse in
preview.
basketball. Yeah,
But they do play. There will be another battle of the orange for somebody to try to get revenge by. Shump, I'll start with you. Just kind of, how are you feeling from this game about 4 days out?
yeah. I think might have said this on the pod last week. Like I feel like Tennessee will score somewhere between 21 and 30, 35 points in this game, and Syracuse will score somewhere between like 10 and 17, maybe 20. So, I think the line's a pretty good one. I think my initial thought is to go, man, that's a lot of points for a Tennessee team that has so much new. But then I just kind of think about the NC State game last year, in which Tennessee offense didn't really look that good for most of the game, and still they absolutely dominated. In large part because NC State couldn't move the football, and Tennessee just kind of ended up being able to wear on them with their offense and find some chunk plays in the run game and some good schemed plays offensively, not massive plays down the field, but 20, 30-yard plays. So that's kind of my general thought, but we'll see how I'm feeling on Friday.
I've said it a couple times where it just feels like Tennessee's defense is going to be too much. So I sit with like Syracuse probably 7 to 14 points in that range right now, unless the only wrinkle, which we also talked about, is if Tennessee's offense or special teams helps out Syracuse's offense. And assuming that doesn't happen, for me right now, it just feels like Tennessee's defense is going to do a good job of limiting what Syracuse does, which certainly puts you in a great spot to win if you take some pressure off Joey Aguilar on the offense to have to go up and put a big number.
Yeah, I think for Tennessee, it's about limiting turnovers, whether that be on the ground or through the air. Don't give Syracuse any extra opportunities to try to gain a little bit of momentum throughout the game, play solid defense. But I go back to something that Shump said at the beginning of the show, and that is ultimately the battle of the trenches. I think that Tennessee's got the advantage there, and I think that plays huge when you're starting a season with two teams who are trying to sort of rebuild their identity. Deshaun Bishop said it during his interview on, I don't know if that was Monday or Tuesday, but earlier this week, he says he feels like Tennessee knows what their identity is going to be, but people are going to find that out for themselves on Saturday. That's one of the things I'm most curious about, what is, or at least what do they show early into the season against Syracuse. But again, when you got two teams who are working in new quarterbacks who did not go through spring training camps, they're a bit limited in what they've been able to do so far. I think that things come down to the trenches, and I feel confident that Tennessee can win the game there. So I think Ryan set a pretty good line himself, just sort of around what those things could look like. I'm seeing here about FanDuel, Tennessee about a 13.5-point favorite. If you go over to something else, you might catch Syracuse at plus 14. Over under sitting around 50.5, maybe 51, depending on where you look. So those are some of the odds going into that game. But I do think that if Tennessee shows up, plays strong defense, wins the trenches, and can run the ball with their trio of running backs, who I think are very talented, I think they're going to win this game. And then again, we'll see what Joey Aguilar does to start off his final year in college football, his final year, first and final year, if you will, with Tennessee football as well. So a lot of interesting things to look at for this game.
Yeah, no doubt. I think it's more than any sport. There's just more to watch in the first game because one, there's so few of them, and two, we see so little of it in the preseason. So from a media perspective, there's more surprises. So it'll be really interesting. I'm sure it'll be good, bad, and in between that we'll be talking about on Saturday afternoon following once the clock hits 0.
It is just individual basis. Like you hear all the hype around guys like Ethan Davis, guys like Mike Matthews, but we haven't had to see it yet because it's only been at spurts in practice. So it'll be very interesting too, not just as a team, but on individual bases for guys like that. What is this season actually going to look like? I'm fascinated to see what this season looks like for those guys.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. I will say, fighting off a couple sneezes right now. So if I don't make it to the end, somebody kind of carry me to the finish line, if you will, there. But hey, as always, we got a lot of stuff coming out to RockyTopInsider.com. Make sure you are checking out the website each and every day. And of course, Rocky Top Insider on YouTube. It's where you're going to find post-game shows from the three of us. It's where you're going to find the RTI Press Pass podcast video. And of course, it's where you're going to find press conferences, whether that be from Tennessee after the game, from Syracuse after the game. We're going to be uploading everything onto the YouTube account. So make sure you're maybe even turning the notifications on. You are certainly subscribing to the YouTube account so you won't miss anything, not just for this game, but for the season ahead. Be sure to look out for predictions coming out on the website on Friday. And then, of course, pregame just before the 11 o'clock hour, we are going live with WATE, Sylvia and I, as we preview this Tennessee-Syracuse game. You'll hear some of what we said today, but of course, some new game day opinions as well. So make sure to be on the lookout for that. Channel 6 WATE. Otherwise, man, just make sure you're following the RTI Twitter account, Facebook account, what else? TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it might be. We are there on social media, so make sure you're following along with all those. We'll try to bring some pictures, some videos, whatever we can from the game day experience in Atlanta in Mercedes-Benz Stadium on Saturday. But otherwise, it's going to pretty much wrap it up for us today. That is Ryan Shumpert. You can follow him at rshump00. That is Ryan Sylvia. You can follow him at Ryan T. Sylvia. And my name is Rick Butler. You can follow me at Rick_Butler. But of course, at Rocky Top Insider on all social media platforms. Oh, by the way, give our good friend Jack Foster a follow as well at Jack Foster Media. It was good to hang out with him this past weekend with the three of us as well. Hey, fun times ahead. Week 1 is almost here. We got a big college football season ahead. Thank you so much. Make sure you're locking in to the RTI Press Pass. You're subscribing on YouTube. You're hitting that follow button, whether it's on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Make sure you're doing all those things. And hey, if you would be so kind, leave us a 5-star rating to get things going right here. Thanks so much for listening to the show today. For Ryan, I am Rick. Thanks for listening to the RTI Press Pass podcast. We will see you in Atlanta.